Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am Brewcat. This is Jam Day Warehouse, and today I decided to go through the cards from Secret Lair 30th Anniversary, the Advent Calendar, the Countdown Kit, and talk about each card from each year and explain why certain cards are in here. Because I've seen a lot of people make comments about not understanding why some of these cards are in here. Several people that I will not call out because I have respect for many of these creators, but it doesn't change the fact that I think there is an argument to be made for every single card in here, and an explanation for the ones that might seem a little bit strange. Because this Secret Lair, this was a love letter. Like, this selection of cards was a love letter for players like me that I've been playing. My very first pack was Exodus, and my very first rare was Recurring Nightmare, and I was hooked ever since. Ever since eight, was it not? Yeah, I was 8 at the time. Turned 9 a couple months later. Ever since 8-year-old me first had that Rexer Slivers deck back in '98 that I played with a rubber band around it, I have been deep into watching the pro scene. I remember back in the day having to get the videotapes to watch Worlds. I remember going online in the late 2000s to read about tournaments that happened, going back and seeing clips of some of my favorite players play. And for someone like me that is this deep in it, so this deep in the nuts and bolts, this is a love letter to players like me and to players like many of you, I am sure. So let's start with Shivan Dragon, 1993. And I do like how they numbered these cards based on the year. So Shivan Dragon came from 1993, and so its card number is 1993. So, most of the cards from 1993 that really made a name for the game are reserved lists, so they're not going to print any of those. Which, once you take out like Power 9, that pretty much leaves you with, if you want to get something iconic, you have to pick the cycle of iconic creatures. So, the green and the blue ones are absolute crap. They were even kind of overlooked back in their day. I believe Force of Nature was the green one. I think it's what, 8 mana, 8/8. You pay 4 mana for every upkeep, and that got replaced just a set or two later. People would rather play Colossus of Sardia than that. For blue, I believe it was Mamadi Jin. 6 mana, 5/6 flyer, which is, I would have still been happy with either of those for the throwback. And next on our list would be Sengir Vampire, which, if I recall, is a 5 mana 3/3. That every time that a creature that it killed in combat dies, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Sengir Vampire is amazing. And personally, that's what I would have picked for this. I love my Sengir Vampires. Sengir Vampires, my hippies. If I can Dark Writ that thing into play early, that's what I want to play. But it's not as iconic as some other options. And Sarah Angel would probably be the best card for this slot, but they picked Sarah Angel for the anniversary promos. I believe it's the most expensive promo right now. It goes for a couple $100. Gorgeous card, gorgeous art, and I'm perfectly fine with that being there and Shivan Dragon being here. Because honestly, in order, Sarah Angel was the best, Shivan Dragon was second, Sanger was third, the green one was fourth, and blue trailed off in the back. Blue got other tools, and green was never good before 2018. But we all know Shivan Dragon like the back of our hands. We've gotten them in all of our first decks. Like they gave them out like popcorn. But back in 1993, it was a different story. People were trading their Moxen, their Time Walks, their Black Lotuses for Shivan Dragons. That is just how big it was in 93. So if you look back at that point in time, you could arguably say if it was 93, that Shivan Dragon might have been just as iconic as Black Lotus, which is why I'm perfectly fine with this being in this secret lair. It deserves to be here. Mishra's Factory from 1994 changed the way that we looked at the game. Manlands, that's a big deal. And to have one that cost 1 mana to turn into a creature and had the thing that everyone forgot about, where you could tap another one to give it +1/+1. Or if you're blocking, if someone's attacking with, let's see, back then, a Fungusaur or a Hill Giant, no, not Hill Giant's a 4-mana 3/3, a Gray Ogre, the 3-mana 2/2s. If people could attack into that, and then you bring up the Mishra's Factory, block, tap your Mishra's Factory after blockers are declared, make it a 3/3, and kill their thing. Mishra's Factory was the card if you were playing Control back in the day, and it changed the way that we looked at Magic. And speaking of changed the way we looked at Magic, 1995, Necropotence. Ice Age was famously called the worst card in Ice Age. But we all know now that turn 1 Dark Ritual into Necropotence is insane. Now, a lot of you today are like, oh yeah, I got Necropotence, it's in my EDH deck because I have to play it. If I don't play it, then I'm not competitive. But this card is banned in Legacy. I believe it's restricted in Vintage, because this card is way too good at what it does. If you can get this out, if you go turn 1, Swamp, tap, Dark Ritual, Necro, that's 3 cards down, you have 4 cards left in your hand, you pay 3 life, pass turn to your opponent, you're back up to 7. That is an insane start to the game. And you could just go from there, like dump your hand every single turn, and as soon as you dump your hand, just turn right back around and draw all those cards back over and over again. You had to have ways to gain life. A lot of these decks like to play things like Zuran Orb to get themselves out of a lock. Every one of these decks played Nevinral's Disc. But after, I believe it was Randy Bueller who took a Necro deck that had, oh god, what was it? I believe it was Ebon Hand was the name of the card. God, what was it? It was, if I recall, a 2 black for a 2/2. Oh, let's see. I have my 96 Necro deck right here. So let me take a look inside. And of course, I had to get the original Ice Age Necros. Maybe I'll show this one off one day. Order of the Ebon Hand. 2 black, 2/1, protection from white. 2 mana to give +1/+0, and 1 mana for first strike. And then the functional reprint was Knight of Stromgald. So you had 2 cards that were the exact same cards, so you could play 8 of them. This deck was hyper consistent. And it's really hard to fight against these little pumpers, because Necropotence is not going to miss its land drops. And that's why this deck ended up being a this deck ended up starting what was known as Necro Summer, where Necropotence was the most dominant card after Randy Buehler won that tournament. I believe it was a Pro Tour. And after that, Necro blew up because people realized the power that was in that card and in that deck. If you didn't play Necro, you're losing to Necro. And that's why that card is on this list. Not that I really need to tell you, because anyone who has played or played against Necro knows this card is nuts. Limdul's Vault. Now, this is one that people were surprised about, and I actually have. I'm pretty sure I know why this card was the chosen card. So, over here, I've pulled up the best cards from 1996. You have Lake of the Dead, that's reserved list. Contagion, that is absolutely worthless today. This was the black pitch card. You could pitch a card from your hand to play this for 0 mana and put 2/2/1 counters on any creatures. So exile a card and cast this. You can kill 2 small things or 1 small thing that's a little bit bigger. It was a good card. It saw a lot of play, but it's not really what you want. Enlightened Tutor, now that's an actual option, but I'm sure they're saving this for a reprint. And they gave us value elsewhere. We just got past Necro, which is not a cheap card. Lion's Eye Diamond is reserved list. Mystical Tutor, that's another option. And it's another very good option. But both Mystical Tutor and Enlightened Tutor are niche, even though they are both very expensive. Here is Limdul's Vault, and I'll come back to that in a second. Latinum Legacy. This is actually a pretty cool card, but you're not going to play this anymore. This is trash nowadays, but at this point in 1996, that card was incredible. Wall of Roots. Now that actually could have been another option, but once again you have the problem with value. This is even cheaper than Limdul's Vault. Arcane Denial could have been a good option. A very good counterspell. And Force of Will. Now, if we got Force of Will, we would not have gotten Chrome Mox. You could decide which one of those was a better option. I think there's an argument for both. I'm not sure which one I personally would have preferred because they are both very good options, very good cards. But you got both. But you got Limdol's Vault. Sorry, not both. And here's the thing about Limdol's Vault. I do believe that it's not had a printing yet, like a reprint. So it's never been printed in foil, if I recall correctly. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I bought my playset like 10, 15 years ago. So this is a great place to reprint a very, very powerful tutor. This may be one of the most powerful tutors in the game. 1 blue, 1 black. So demonic tutor mana. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Pay 1 life and put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. Then look at the top 5 cards of your library over and over again until you find exactly what you want. And here's the thing. If you have a way for infinite life, or a way to make sure you don't lose the game by paying life, looking at you, Phyrexian Unlife, what you can do is you can make your own Doomsday if you have patience and a number of cards that is not divisible by 5, by simply taking your top 5 cards, putting them in a certain order so that you have the cards you want either on top or more likely on bottom, and then look at the next 5 cards and over again you'll move the cards up and down through your deck until you build the exact stack of cards that you want. Do you want to have your own Doomsday? Then play Phyrexian Unlife and Limdol's Vault. This card is nuts. It deserves to be here. Even if you don't have the infinite combo, it's still a tutor. Sure, you might pay as much as, turn 2, you could be paying as much as 10 life if the card you need is on the bottom of your library. But let's be honest, if the card was on the bottom of your library, were you not willing to spend 10 life to get it to the top of your library? If it's the combo piece you need, if it's the utility card that you need to play because you realized who you're up against, this card is incredible and it deserves to be here. Tradewind Rider. This is actually the card that first got me thinking I needed to make this. A lot of people don't know what Tradewind Rider is. They've never seen it before in their lives. But if you were playing in 1997 and 1998, Tradewind Rider was the de facto best card in Standard. I think it was Type 2 back then. And because it's a boomerang, it returns any permanent. You can bounce lands back to your opponent's hand, and you can slowly tick away at your opponent's resources. They played a 4-mana creature, bounce it back to hand. 4-mana artifact, bounce it back to hand. So you can play this past your opponent. They play a thing. If they follow the mana curve and drop something big, you bounce it back, and then you basically just gave yourself a time walk. And you can draw out the game till you get maybe 2 or 3 of these out there and a few tokens. Man, that's some insanity. Especially when you get to the point you're bouncing 2 permanents. Bounce the thing they played and bounce a land. Do that over and over again a few times, and you will get ahead. This card was played anytime that there was blue, except for the creature deck, where the creature was one copy of Rainbow Efreet. Other than that, like, if you're playing blue, you wanted Tradewind Rider. Rex Sir played Tradewind Rider just because it was it was just such a busted card. Why would you not? Like, that's just how good this card was. One of the greatest decks in World Tour history, or World Championship history. Tradewind Rider was in that deck just because it was that good. Today, it doesn't look that great, but it definitely deserves to be in this nostalgic Secret Lair. It earned its place by defining a format. And if you don't know what kind of beating it is to see this thing drop on curve, if you weren't there, you're not going to understand, and I get that. But this card cannot be denied for all of us who played back then. Smokestack doesn't need much of an explanation. This card started a brand new archetype of destroying stuff. And the thing was, it was not the first card to do this kind of effect. The first card was Mana Vortex. It's this beautiful card from the dark that said, where are you? Each player who controls land sacrifices one land during his or her upkeep. If at any time there are no lands in play, Mana Vortex is destroyed. If you do not sacrifice a land when Mana Vortex is cast, it is countered. That was our very first attempt at some kind of enchantment artifact, some kind of permanent that would make do an effect that would hurt you and your opponent in parity. And Smokestack did it better. The card is insane. It created its own format. It is one of the most hated archetypes, and it definitely deserves its spot here. Squee Goblin Nabob got Survival of the Fittest banned in Legacy. There was a time, Patrick Chapin once said about Legacy, Legacy is very balanced. There is it's very balanced. Combo, aggro, and control are all represented. Combo survival, aggro survival, and control survival. And one of the most important cards in that deck was the one of Squee Goblin Nabob. Because if you're playing Survival of the Fittest, you have to have creatures in hand to discard in order to make your deck tick. So if you sacrifice Squee and you go get your thing, and it gets removed at the beginning of your upkeep, you would not be just dead to rights. You'd bring the Squee back to your hand, and then just start ripping through your deck again with Survival of the Fittest. This card is the reason this and Vengevine are the reasons that Survival of the Fittest is banned basically everywhere. I guess Legacy. It's the reason it's banned in Legacy. So it deserves to be here for its iconic place, breaking Legacy in half. Lynn Civi's an interesting one because I've seen several people ask why the hell this is here. But Lynn Civi, if you played back then, you remember that all the Urza stuff, once it rotated out, you played Lin Civi, because what you would do is, let me see here. I am someone who used to collect old tournament winning decks because I wanted them as a child, and then when I grew up and had money, I went back and bought all those decks that I loved when I was a kid, including Rebels. So let me see if I can find the ladder. All right. My God, this deck was so bad. I love it. So here was your chain. Sergeant would go get Lieutenant, would get Lin Civi, would get Ramosin Sky Marshal as backup. And by doing this chain, Ramosin Sergeant can you can pay 3 mana and tap it to get any rebel with converted mana cost 2 or less. Lieutenant was 2 mana, so you would go get this, and for 4 mana you could search. There's 4 mana tap, you can search for a rebel with converted mana cost 3 or less and put it into play. Lin Civi was 3 mana and had X and tap. Search your library for a rebel card with converted mana cost X or less and put that card in play. So then you would get Sky Marshal, because Sky Marshal can go get anything for 7 mana. You will not win before you can play the 7 mana with this in this format. Not just this deck, but in this format. And so if they could take care of your Sky Marshal, you could pay the 7, tap it, go get another Lin Civi. Or if you really need it, a Jovial Queen. Or maybe you go out and get yourself, I don't know, a Steadfast Guard or something like that. But the problem was that inherent card advantage, first off, thinned your deck so you could get to your other pieces very efficiently. All of the best cards rotated out, which meant you were playing Rebels or you were not. And if you were not, then you were at a loss. And if you were playing Rebels, whether or not you won came down to whether or not you opened Lin Civi. Or not, no, whether or not you played Lin Civi first. Because the legend rule back then said, not if you play your own, you can play your legend and they can play theirs and it's cool. It didn't say, I can play my legend and it kills yours. The rules said, I play my legend, and now you are down a card until you can kill my legend. So whoever won usually came down to who played Lin Civi first. And I believe it eventually got banned because it ran the format so well. And I have played a version of Rebels that won a tournament. I have it. I bought it. full deck and sideboard. I've played it. It is a miserable experience because no one gets to play Magic. And I love it. It is so painful to play that it circles back around and becomes an amazing piece of history. But Lynn Civvy, as derpy as this card looks, ran a whole format. And it was a reasonable Magic card in a sea of crap. You either played crap or crap, and Lynn Civvy was one of the very few reasonable cards available. She deserves to be here for what she did to that format. And this art is fantastic. Now, Wild Mongrel, this is another one that a lot of people were curious about. I've heard a lot of people say, I like the art, but why is this here? Well, when this was dropped, this created an archetype because madness was a thing. And I believe I even have that deck. Ugh. Now, there were two versions of Madness. One was extended and one was standard. The extended was a lot more... Extended was Dr. Teeth, which honestly, let me be clear, I do think Dr. Teeth would have been a better choice. But, because I love my Dr. T, my Dr. Psychotog was probably the best version of this deck. That was this deck realized. But you would play Wild Mongrel and discard Basking Rootwall and pay its madness cost of 0, so 0 mana for a 1/1. You have a Memnite with upside. Discard Deep Analysis. Pay 2 mana and 3 life to draw 2 cards. Discard Arrogant Worm. 3 mana for a 4/4 trample. All of this at instant speed, by the way, because of the madness. Maybe, and, was it, oh, your opponent's going to play something devastating? Discard Circular Logic. Pay 1 mana to counter target spell, unless they pay 1 for each card in your graveyard. You're playing fucking madness. They are not going to be able to pay that much. That's not a thing that's going to happen. The other things that, other cards that, oh yeah, and Roar of the Worm. Discard it, pay 4 mana for a 6/6. So in its day, this was like a stompy mid-range deck that took advantage of madness to play things for above rate at the time. Now, of course, today this would be looked at as just a really, really bad aggro deck because it's a creature-based deck from 2001. But Wild Mongrel was the cornerstone of this deck. See, the thing was, for your other cards, which could enable madness, you had Merfolk Looter. Tap, draw a card, discard a card. That's a good card, especially for this. Tap the Merfolk Looter, discard whatever, play the Merfolk Looter, draw a card, discard whatever you want to madness into play. But it's a tap. You can only do it once. Wild Mongrel, you can do it as many times as you want. Aquamoeba is the other big enabler. This one doesn't tap. Discard a card from your hand to switch its power and toughness until end of turn. You could do that infinite times, but the most you could ever do is you'd switch it from a 1/3 to a 3/1 to a 1/3 to a 3/1. Wild Mongrel, if you've managed to hit a couple deep analysis and you've dragged on into late game, you could swing with this thing with 4 cards in hand, discard your entire hand after blockers are declared and it's going through, and it's a 6/6 and can finish a game, making this the best one of the enablers of the deck, because it also doubled as an actual win condition, unlike the others. Wild Mongrel deserves its place on this spot, and it really shows it deserves a place on this spot because Genesis was in that deck. Genesis, the only reason anyone knows what it is because it was a really cool way for you to spend a little bit of mana every turn and get your utility creatures, or get the creatures that died back up into your hand. So you played, I don't know, well, maybe they killed your Wild Mongrel. You can bring it back into your hand. Maybe they killed your Arrogant Worm. You can bring that back to your hand. They killed your Basking Root Wallow. Why not spend 3 mana and put it back into your hand? You're able to. But the reason this card existed or became known was the same reason that we know what Wonder is, because it was in this Simic Madness deck that was a terror to Standard for 2 years. And that's why I honestly think that this was a weaker choice. 2002, we're talking about some incredible cards. You could have even, I believe Wonder was also part of same set as Genesis. That would have been a better card because we're still going with the same deck. Why not? But Genesis does deserve to be here. I think that it was slightly off, but I'm still very happy it's here, representing the evolution of the Wild Mongrel deck. Next is Chrome Mox. They needed some value. Chrome Mox was a modern staple. It enabled some of the most broken decks, including everyone's favorite Johnny deck. Krark Clan Ironworks made that a thing. Lantern Control made that a thing. Chrome Mox. Oh no, this was banned in Modern. So I'm thinking of the wrong Mox. They wanted value. Mirrodin has a lot of iconic stuff. They could have put was Mimnarch? Yeah, they could have put Mimnarch in here. They could have put Loxodon Warhammer, which changed the game. I think Darksteel Axe. Darksteel Colossus. But Chrome Mox, they just wanted to have a big money card that was still iconic. Chrome Mox is iconic. We have a Moxen. So, yeah, it deserves to be here. Now, Glimpse of Nature was the first point that we really saw tribal elves become a thing. Before Glimpse of Nature, tribal elves was just like any other tribe. You're going to be like slowly grinding away, playing your 1/1s, tapping them for mana, dumping that mana into whatever. It wasn't until Glimpse of Nature they became a combo deck. You would play Intruder Alarm, so then you would play a Llanowar Elf. Next turn, Play another, Play another 1/1 Dork, tap, both of them, play 2 more Dorks, draw 2 cards, etc., and so on. So Glimpse of Nature made elves what they are today, instead of another Merfolk variant, which was actually really big at this point in time. Believe that around this time was when Rootwater Thief, which was Mike Long's invitational card, won a legacy tournament. Tribal Merfolk. Glimpse of Nature made to where tribal elves didn't play like tribal merfolk anymore. Very good card. Banned in Modern. Is it banned in Legacy? I don't think it's banned in Legacy. I hear it's banned in Commander, though. Not that I play Commander. Oh my god, it's Lightning Helix! Yes, I'm here for it. I've heard so many people ask, why is Lightning Helix here? You want to know why Lightning Helix is here? It's because the most famous bit of commentary, the most famous game of Magic, ended with, oh my god, it's Lightning Helix. Where I believe it was Randy Bueller again, a repeat character in this story of Magic nostalgia, lost his mind as someone flipped over a Lightning Helix, slammed that thing, and won the game with dealing 3 damage and gaining 3 life. Is it an incredible card today? No. Still playable in certain niche decks, but it's not an incredible card anymore. But that does not change the fact that for people who love competitive play, oh my god, it's Lightning Helix is as much a part of Magic as Islands and Swamps. This deserves to be here. Fight me. Bogarden Hellkite is another card which was a major part of a deck which became famous due to an extended tournament where Patrick Chapin and Gabriel Nassif, Yellow Hat, played against each other in a game, and one of their matches came down to the wire, where I believe Nassif did a mulligan to 4 or 3. Can't remember which one. And ended up winning the match based off of 5 random chances and managed to win his match. Bogarden Hellkite was a major part of that Dragonstorm deck, because what you would do is you would play your Lotus Blooms and such, which all create mana. So you would, your Lotus Bloom would come out of Suspend, which would mean that it was a cast spell. Then you would take that mana and the mana you had in your mana pool, and you would Ritual, that's 3 spells cast a Dragonstorm, that's 4 Dragonstorms, you get Bogarden Hellkites, 4 of them, to deal 5 damage to your opponent's face, and if they're still alive after 20 damage to the face, they have 4 5/5 dragons to deal with, or else they're dead, and there's nothing they can do about it. And that's not including the fact that you had like lightning strikes and such to chuck at your opponent's face and win the game. So this definitely deserves to be here once again for one of the most incredible games of Magic to watch. If you like exciting Magic, if you like seeing random chance being the thing that won a game, go watch that match between Nassif and Chapin. Ponder, it's iconic. It's the second best cantrip. It's the right behind Brainstorm. This has been a very controversial card for a long time. It's hard to play. Just as hard to play as Gush and such. But it's an incredible card. That's why it's banned in Modern. Might be, is it? I think it's Legacy legal. But there's a reason it's not in Modern. Heritage Druid. Now, if Glimpse of Nature gave elves an identity, Heritage Druid made it a real deck. So before, the problem with Glimpse of Nature elves was you would play your Glimpse of Nature, and then you would plop out your hand of 3 or 4 elves, but they couldn't tap for mana, so you would just replace the ones you got until you ran out of mana and it was over. Heritage Druid made it to where you could play your Glimpse of Nature. And yeah, what is it? Elf, tap the 3 elves. Now you've drawn 2 more cards, you got 3 more mana. Elf, tap 3 elves, draw 3 cards. Elf, tap 3 elves, draw 3 cards. It made it a combo deck. And Heritage Druid was the big enabler. It changed the way that elves played. It made elves go from a fringe playable kitschy deck to a tier 1 legacy deck. Heritage Druid deserves to be here. This card is incredible. Bloodbraid Elf. Okay. So we all know Jace the Mind Sculptor is better than all. What a lot of people forget is Jace got next to 0 play after it was first printed. It wasn't until rotation, when Bloodbraid Elf went away, that Jace the Mind Sculptor was able to break out, because Bloodbraid Elf was perfectly positioned to take out the best Planeswalker ever printed. It made its own format. It made its own archetype. We've all heard of Jund, but Jund wouldn't be a thing without Bloodbraid Elf. That's why the red is in Jund. You'd play that black, green, red deck. Your Bloodbraid Elf would go and get anything out of your deck and play it. This card was banned in Modern for a long time because Jund was already way too good. I believe that it was pre-banned. I could be wrong on that one. But people were afraid of Bloodbraid Elf into Liliana of the Veil. Like, that is a terrifying thought in 2011 and 2012. Bloodbraid Elf, for being the format staple that it was, for defining a format, it deserves to be here. Now, Sun Titan, I have a theory. A lot of people are saying, why Sun Titan? It's the cheapest Titan. It's the worst Titan. It's been printed to death. Here's the thing. Sun Titan is still the 3rd best Titan. Number 1 is Prime Time. Number 2 is Grave Titan. Number 3 is Sun Titan. And number 4 is Inferno Titan. And number 5 is Frost Titan. Frost Titan is the worst. All it does is tap things down, which is still incredible. Inferno Titan does a Forked Lightning Bolt every turn. 3 damage wherever you want it. Excellent card. And it's been a Fisher before. Sun Titan has been a combo piece. And it's been the card that most, of the Titans, Sun Titan actually has a story in the game. Sun Titan was, I believe it's decimated. Well, Sun Titan was killed and then brought back to life with Reanimate Dead. There is a whole art story, go check it out. But you still have 2 Titans that are better. Prime Time and Grave Titan. Both of those probably would have been better ones to go for. But we had a Titan Secret Lair last year, at the beginning of last year. And in it, we had Grave Titan, Frost Titan, Primeval Titan, and Inferno Titan, but no Sun Titan. So this is Sun Titan's first showing as a Secret Lair. So it can slot right on in with the rest of your Titans for the collection. We have all 5 Titans in Secret Lair. I believe that's why Sun Titan was chose over the other options. They already gave us the other options. It has nothing to do with they were being cheap. I think that this is a nostalgic piece of one of the most iconic cycles of cards. Now, personally, I think I would have rather had Baneslayer Angel, but I will take Sun Titan as a card from a cycle that changed the way that we looked at creatures. And Magic has been trying to recreate the magic of for the last 12, 13 years. Birthing Pod. Now, this one is fun because not only did it define modern, Birthing Pod was so good, the design team could not make better creatures because they had to think back to Birthing Pod. Going up the chain was such a thing that designers knew if they made a creature that was too good, the Birthing Pod would play it. They actually said another card that's a couple cards up on this list was the absolute best they could make a creature while Birthing Pod was still legal and modern. So Birthing Pod getting banned is the reason we're able to have the crazy creatures we have nowadays. If we still had Birthing Pod, they would have to design around Birthing Pod. Deathrite Shaman, the best planeswalker ever printed. 1 mana, 3 effects, the best mana dork ever printed. Like, we started with Birds of Paradise, which was amazing, and we ended with Deathrite Shaman. When you're playing with fetch lands, turn 1, fetch land, fetch up a green or black, play your Deathrite Shaman. Next turn, you're going on 3 mana. And you could gain life to stabilize, you could deal damage in the late game, all while eating the graveyard. You're constantly eating the graveyard. This card is incredible. This card, if it was legal and modern, would turn Jund into the best deck again overnight. It is just too good to be denied. Now, Elspeth Sun's Champion. This is a fun one too. Which, this is actually the card that made it to where I went out and fought to get my own Secret Lair Countdown kit. Which I'll be discussing in another video. I love the old border planeswalkers where they do the old style of effect. It's amazing. Now, Elspeth Sun's Champion defined a format in such a way that the top games at Pro Tour Journey into Nyx, which was Patrick Chapin's first Pro Tour win, and the finals at Worlds that year, which also featured Patrick Chapin. Both of these decks played Elspeth Sun's Champion, as not only did Chapin's decks play Elspeth Sun's Champion, his opponent's decks played Elspeth Sun's Champion at Pro Tour, Journey into Nyx, and and the World Championship. The top 2 decks both played this card. This card defined what Standard was the entire time it was there. The ability to make 3/1/1 tokens with a plus ability was something that we had never seen before. We had seen 4 mana get +1 make 1 token. We had never seen make an army in a can. We had never seen army in a can like this before. It deserves to be here. It ran a format, and it shone in a deck that had Siege Rhino. Oh wait, no, it didn't. It's yeah, that's right. This shuffled out right as Siege Rhino came in. This was Siege Rhino before Siege Rhino, which, by the way, here's Siege Rhino. This card, it was on the chopping block for the ban list the entire time that it was in standard, and it never got banned, luckily. This card made it to where there are several cards that would have been seen as incredible that never got play. Such as, I believe it was, there's a Knuckle Blade that was like a 4 mana 4/4 or a 3 mana 4/4, something like that, in 3 different colors that did some crazy whatever, and you couldn't play it because it could not kill the Siege Rhino. The Siege Rhino, being a 4/5, was too good. If you played a 4 mana spell, it had to be at least as good as Siege Rhino, or able to answer Siege Rhino, or be better than Siege Rhino, which it couldn't be better than Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino is too good. It's the reason that we had Abzan take over Modern for a little while, because there's nothing better to do than play Siege Rhino. Saffron Olive got famous because he made a deck that was called, what was it, 20 Rhinos or 30 Rhinos or something like that, where he just played a stack of ways to play Rhino and copy Rhino. This card changed the game. This was the game. The entire time it was in standard. Amazing card, deserves to be here. Dragon Lord Ojutai. Now, if they're only going to pick one dragon, I'm glad they picked what was the best one in standard. This saw the most competitive play. This was the most iconic of that cycle. You could have put Ugin as the card from 2015 that was the most iconic. I actually think Ugin would have fit here very well, but if you're going to pick one of the Elder Dragon series, then Ojutai is definitely the one you choose. I mean, hexproof as long as it's untapped. If it ever hits the opponent, then you get to do a strange brainstorm. Look at the top 3, 1 in your hand, 2 at the bottom of your library. This made control decks a thing. Without Dragon Lord Ojutai to be able to keep refilling the hand for, I believe it was Jeskai decks. Like it was not only iconic, it was a cornerstone of the format that it was in. Now, Talia, on the other hand, is a very interesting choice. I can think of several cards that I might have picked over Thalia. And I'm a Thalia simp. My pre-release promo from Shadows over Innistrad was Thalia Heretic Cathar. I've made so many decks with her. I have a modern Geistblade deck that plays her in the sideboard for those aggro matchups. And other matchups that I have issues with, but mostly aggro matchups. So your opponent is going off and makes like 4/1/1s, and they can't attack. But you could have played Collective Brutality, which in 2016 was a much bigger card in its time. Even if it's cheaper now than Thalia, in its time it was a bigger creature. You could have played, could have put Liliana the Last Hope in here, but we just gotten a Liliana the Last Hope in Double Masters, so that's out. Let's see what all came out in 2016. It's been a long time, hasn't it? It would have been Kaladesh is the next one after this, if I recall. So you could have put Crazy Cat Lady. Or, no, that would have been, what is it, Machine Gun Kelly would have been in 2017. But the point is, Thalia may not have been the best choice, but it's still a very good card, and a very iconic card. Really embodies what Shadows over Innistrad was all about, and embodies what Magic in 2016 was about. Because the deck that won that tournament was a mono white deck that had a couple Thalias in it. Excellent card. Deserves to be here, but it's more like a silver or bronze medal deserves to be here. But I am still happy to see her. Just iconic card, so good. Now, Nicol Bolas, this was when this hit, I remember how much people flipped out. Everyone wanted it, everyone had to have it. I saw people doing stupid trades for this card because it was it's another 4 ability planeswalker. Before Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh, we had Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and Jace the Mind Sculptor. And both were excellent. Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh is an incredible card. Now you could go for something like Torment of Hailfire. If you want to talk about 2017 Magic, you could pick something from Ixalan if you hated yourself that much. But Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh, I think, was a very solid choice. We got the Chibi Planeswalker. It began, this was our first time watching the Gatewatch actually come to a head with Nicol Bolas. That story that started back with Alara, where Nicol Bolas was held to a stalemate by Ajani. And this was Nicol Bolas showing that he had arrived and deserves to be here. Really deserves to be here, regardless of what anyone says. Next we have Arclight Phoenix. This card, while actually seeing play in Standard, I actually played Phoenix in Standard. It was a ludicrous deck. It was very janky. It was clunky. But it was playable. I won some games with it. It was fun. Modern is where Arclight Phoenix really hit its stride, because you could do things like opt, slide a hand, and oh yeah, Faithless Looting was a thing. You'd go Faithless Looting, opt, Faithless Looting again. Arclight Phoenix comes back on the battlefield, swing and win. Excellent card, part of an excellent archetype. It has not done well lately. Ever since the Phoenix lost its best enabler in Faithless Looting, it's never been the same, but still definitely deserves to be here. Now, Emery is an interesting case because Emery sees massive play in Modern. It sees some fringe play in Legacy. I hear it sees play in Vintage. I don't know. I don't play Vintage. I know it's big in Commander. I've heard a lot about it. But Emery is an insane card. While nowhere near the best card, it is the card that has seen play in the most formats due to its artifact recursion. Now, 3 mana is a very interesting mana cost, because that's a cost of Black Lotus. So you could Black Lotus tap sack Emery, and then starting next turn, you have a Black Lotus every single turn. Excellent card. Like I said, probably the second or third best card from them, but probably one of the most in your face and iconic. Shark Typhoon is a meme, but it's a good card. Yeah, if I'm looking at what I would want out of 2020, Sharknado seems like it. Like, it came on the scene, people thought it was a joke card, and it turned out to be a real card and a real good card. I don't see an issue with Shark Typhoon being here. I'm perfectly fine with it. I think a lot of you are perfectly fine with it. And let's see, Elite Spellbinder. This one surprised me that a lot of people didn't want it. But this was a big deal because it had Victor Domodorosa's face on it. It was his card that he designed. Excellent card. This actually changed the way that we looked at death and taxes in Standard. The way that it would take the card away for a limited amount of time, put extra taxes on it, and if your opponents are really desperate, they'll pay the extra mana, setting them back because they're playing things very inefficiently. It's a good card. It bought you time. It messed with your opponent's tempo. It had Domodorosa's face on it. How do you not approve of this card? It's a good card. It had its impact. It should be here. Moving on. This is the one card that I actually have an issue with. But it's from 2022, so I'm giving it a pass, but I'm going to speak my piece. Kamigawa, probably the best set this year to pick from. Which one of you, your favorite card was Nashi? Maybe a couple EDH players. If I was picking something out of Kamigawa, I'd be picking one of the cycle lands. I would be picking maybe Wandering Emperor or Kikijiki. Oh man, Kikijiki. Cards like this. Nashi, it's a cool card. I love it so much. It does some really cool things. I've heard that it's really fun to play with. If you're throwing a bone for the EH players, fine. Either way, I still adore this product. I just don't think that Nashi was the best decision. But there you have it, 30 years of Magic, and why each one of these cards deserves to be on this list. Now, the card that really convinced me more than anything that I need to do this was Tradewinder. Sorry, I'm gonna try. Brain, work with me here. Tradewind Rider. Only I listened to someone talk about Tradewind Rider, very confused, wondering why it was here. This collection of cards has value, obviously. This collection of cards is more about the nostalgia that's just dripping out of it. This was a love letter of a set to someone like me. And I personally can't wait for mine to get here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will be doing another video on my take on the Countdown Kit debacle. I'll talk about my experiences. I'll talk about what I saw, things that I have heard through the grapevine, and we will discuss aspects of the delivery of putting this up for pre-order. But until then, don't forget to like and subscribe. I do videos whenever something really strikes me like this. I'm Rukak. This is Game Day Warehouse. Until next time, have a good evening.